In episode 12 of Tencent's version of the three-body problem, Wang Miao is taken around a civilization where a mechanistic view of the universe is predicted to be an explanation for the three-body problem. Some things about this depiction in the TV show were accurate and other things weren't. Link in the description where I go over what was accurate and what wasn't. In this video, I'm going to focus on the philosophy of Mozi as articulated in the eponymous book Mozi. This is the first, if not the last, book I've actually read in response to seeing a funny meme. After seeing this meme and knowing a bit about Confucius, it made me curious, what was Mozi actually like? Mozi was born like Confucius in the state of Liu in around 470 BC, early period of the Warring States. Other videos will focus more on his life. I might do one in the future about it. This one will focus on the actual philosophy that he left us. Overall, I can actually say this meme is quite accurate. Mozi does say music is decadent, and he does ideally aim at the love of all people. He does have whole chapters dedicated to siegecraft, focuses on practice. All quotes I'm giving are taken from the Mozi bilingual edition, Dragon Reader Kindle edition. This quote taken from page 20. I quote, "All states in the world, large or small, are cities of heaven, and all people, young or old, honourable and humble, are its subjects. For they all graze oxen and sheep, feed dogs and pigs, and prepare clean wine and cakes to sacrifice to heaven. Does this not mean that heaven claims all and accepts offerings from all?" Mozi has a more fleshed out idea of what he sees as heaven compared to Confucius, his predecessor. Confucius mentions heaven, does not go into detail about what heaven wants. He talks of heaven's will, but not what heaven wants here. Also, compared to Confucius, who doesn't have many prescriptions about what it is to be good, just describes an attitude of being good, and that if governance is good, a good civilization and people will follow. Mozi has some specific ideas as to what to do in government. Page 23, and I quote, "When the country is in dearth, all the salaries of all of the officials below rank of minister will be reduced by 1/5. In scarcity, they will be reduced by 2/5. In calamity, they will be reduced by 3/5. In want, they will be reduced by 4/5. And when famine is in the country, there will be no salaries." It makes me wonder sometimes, has this ever actually been tried in government? Imagine that. A leadership who actually have to suffer along with the people if they face problems. Perhaps this would be a good solution. Mozi too advocates for ideals of thriftiness. Page 27. "The sage kings built houses and palaces in order to better the living conditions, and not for pleasures of sight. They made clothes and hats, belts and shoes in order to protect the body, and not for novelty. They were thrifty themselves, and taught the people to be the same. And so the people in the whole world became orderly, and wealth was sufficient for use." Sometimes Mozi does have a tendency to break down everything into its utilitarian value. He sees very little point in music and art, for example. Some parts of the Mozi might not make much sense to people nowadays. On page 32, the present rulers of large states retain as many women as 1,000, and their household those of small states as many as 100. Therefore men in the empire are mostly without wife, and women without husband, the functions of men and women are prevented and the population becomes small. If the rulers sincerely desire the population to be large and hate to see it small, they must not indulge in retaining too many women. This gets to the idea that we need all people involved and to buy into and have a stake in society. If too many people are left out, guess who comes back to burn the village when they've been ignored? The young boys. I suppose in many ways Mordze's time might not have been too different from our own. In many cases, Mordze would have agreed with the harsh punishments and strong rewards advocated by the reformer Shanyang I have mentioned in previous videos. Page 41, and I quote, "People were all encouraged by rewards and threatened by punishments, and strove with each other after virtue." End quote. It indicates that Mordze seems to understand the value of having strong rewards and harsh punishments. This may bring about virtue, as he says. Sometimes, opposite from the last quote, Mordze has shades of Confucius in his stressing of the importance of proper relationships, functioning relationships between people, like in page 63, and I quote, "The lack of regulations governing relationships between ruler and subject, between superior and subordinate, between elder and younger, and the absence of rules governing the relationships between father and son, and between older and younger brothers, resulted in disorder in the world." Reading this quote reminded me of something straight out of Confucius's The Analects. Wouldn't be out of place there at all. Mordze focuses on the practical more, with more prescriptions, and a whole chapter that I haven't mentioned dedicated to siege warfare, to defensive siege warfare specifically. On this subject of some things, such as Jian Ai, it is Mordze who is the more idealistic one than Confucius. Page 85, and I quote, "Suppose everybody in the world loves universally," that is Jian Ai, "loving others as oneself. Will there be any unfilial individual? When everyone regards his father, his elder brother, and emperor as himself, where to can he direct any unfilial feeling?" Here Mordze is positively idealist, positively utopian. If we love ourselves, and just as we love ourselves, apply that in our behaviour with everyone else and our attitude towards them, then wouldn't the world be great? Jian Ai is one of the major concepts, main things that Mordze is known for. I suppose the modern Chinese food lover, any food lover of any nation, would surely be disappointed by Mordze's attitude to food. Page 127, and I quote, "There is no need of combining the 5 tastes extremely well or harmonizing the different sweet odors, and efforts should not be made to procure delicacies from far countries." There's a sort of Spartan aspect to Mordze sometimes that comes through. Mordze has many warnings for people about the ages of turmoil and disorder and how they come about. There's almost something cyclical about his understanding of history, such as this quote from page 162, and I quote, "What is the reason for disorder of the world? What is the reason for disorder in the world? It is because the gentlemen of the world all understand trifles, but not things of importance." How do we know they understand trifles but not things of importance? Because they do not understand the will of heaven. How do we know they do not understand the will of heaven? by observing the conduct in the family. Many sections of the Mozi follow this question and answer, this Socratic method of questioning, interrogating things. Page 206. Mozi said, "To make any statement or to publish any doctrine, there must first be established some standard of judgment. To discuss without a standard is like determining the directions of sunrise and sunset on a revolving potter's wheel." Someone who is a fan of three-body problem, this might make sense to them. If one does not have agreed upon presuppositions, one cannot make sense of the three-body problem and the three suns spinning around the world. There's even a reference to Confucius's own actions within the Mozi, which reflects the fact that Mozi would have read, or at least his disciples knew of, Confucius's writings. Taken from Analect chapter 10 is a description of Confucius, page 227. "When Lord I received Confucius, he would not sit down on the mat that was not placed straight." Book 10 of the Mozi is entirely devoted to definitions of things. And some later books, I have to say, do not fit in with the main thrust of Mozi's arguments, and they address emotions in a cold manner. Don't seem to fit in with the rest of the book. So I'd recommend the earlier chapters. Mozi comes across as more reasoned, sometimes therefore taken to the extreme of emotionless, than many other ancient philosophers, and more practical and wide-ranging in his application and theology. Mozi is perfectly summed up in this quote, taken from page 373. Peng Qing Shenzhe said, "The past can be known, the future cannot." Mozi said, "Suppose your parents met with misfortune 100 li away, and there was just the margin of a single day. If they could be reached, they could live. If not, they would die. Here is a strong wagon and an excellent horse. Here is also a bad horse and a square-wheeled cart. And you are allowed to choose. Which would you take?" It was replied that the excellent horse and the strong wagon would of course make for a more speedy journey. Mozi said, "How then is the future not knowable?" Mozi reasons his way to things more thoroughly than many other philosophers I've read. He's more wide-ranging in many of his focuses, more on ideals, Gen I, universal love, loving the self, as long as you love yourself, that is, and applying that attitude to others. In that way, he's very idealistic, but in many other ways, he's very practical, very wide-ranging in his philosophy, and highly recommended to anyone interested in Chinese history.